All right, let's get right into it. Every single day, whether we realize it or not, we are smack in the middle of this huge, mostly invisible tug of war. So on one side, you've got this incredible, relentless push of new technology. And on the other, you've got society's need for control, for order, and our own fundamental right to privacy. This isn't some sci-fi future problem. This is the defining battle of our time, happening right now.
And that really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? We're building AI that can learn and evolve faster than we can even comprehend. At the exact same time, governments are building systems to watch and manage everything. So, who's actually in the driver's seat? Who's in control here?
Think of it this way. A tech company dreams up a new AI feature that learns from your private conversations. That's innovation, pushing forward. But a government agency steps in and says, hold on, we need to make sure this isn't used to spread dangerous ideas. That's control, pulling back. And then there's you, the user, saying, hey, I don't want my private thoughts being mined for data. And that's privacy. All three are pulling in totally different directions. To really see how this all shakes out, let's start by stepping into the corporate arena. Companies are in this massive race to get AI into their products, but they're also running into this mountain of new rules and regulations. So how do you possibly innovate at lightning speed without, losing control or completely betraying your users' trust? Well, for starters, the new rules are drawing a really clear line in the sand. There are two main roles here. Are you a provider, the company that's actually building the AI from scratch? Or are you a deployer, the organization that takes that finished AI and uses it, say, to power a chatbot on your website? It's a hugely important distinction because the legal and ethical weight on your shoulders is completely different depending on which hat you're wearing. So what are the smart companies doing about this? They're building these pillars of control right into their DNA. First, it starts at the very top. AI governance becomes a board-level conversation, not something buried in the IT department. Second, they treat risk not like a one-and-done checkbox, but as something they have to manage constantly, every single day. And third, and this one's absolutely critical, they focus on the quality of the data they're feeding the machine. Because we all know, garbage in, garbage out. Biased data is always going to lead to a biased AI. And honestly, this is the big mental shift. Maybe 10 years ago, talking about AI ethics was a side conversation, a nice to have. Today, managing AI bias is becoming exactly like cybersecurity. It is not optional. It's a continuous, measurable, critical process that the board of directors is watching. It's just a fundamental cost of doing business in the age of AI. Okay, so corporations are trying to build these internal guardrails, but what happens when the one trying to maintain control is the state itself? Well, the stakes get way, way higher. See, governments have a unique kind of power. They're a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. But with that kind of power, you need incredible oversight. So how does the state go about controlling itself? So here's one tool that's designed to do just that. It's called the Force Continuum, and it's basically a formal framework that gives law enforcement a guide on how and when to escalate force. It starts with just their presence, then moves to verbal commands, then physical restraints, and it goes all the way up the ladder to deadly force. It's a very real attempt to put structure and control around an immense amount of power. But this is where the ideal of perfect control kind of crashes into a messy reality. You would think, right, that an organization with this much power would have flawless data on how it's being used. But a recent report from the Government Accountability Office found something pretty startling. It revealed a major crack in the system. And the key takeaway was this. The Department of Homeland Security's own data was seriously undercounting how often force was used. The very agencies in charge of using force weren't fully accounting for it. It just goes to show you, even for the most powerful institutions on Earth, controlling your own actions is a massive, and in this case, an unmet challenge. Now, let's zoom in. We're going from the boardroom to the government agency, right down to the most personal level there is, your private conversations. We're talking about the very words you type into your phone. We all kind of operate on this basic assumption, right? When you're chatting with a large language model and you see that little lock icon, you believe the conversation is secure. The content is scrambled, it's encrypted, it's unreadable to anyone trying to snoop. At least, that's what we think. But here's the catch. Here is the vulnerability. While encryption does a great job of hiding what you're saying, it doesn't always hide how you're saying it. The rhythm of your digital chat, the specific size of the little data packets flying back and forth, the tiny delays between them, it all creates a unique digital fingerprint. And that fingerprint, it can be read. This kind of thing is called a side channel attack.
And it's clever because the attacker isn't trying to bash down the front door by breaking the encryption. No, instead, they're kind of metaphorically listening at the walls. They're analyzing those patterns in the traffic, the metadata, to figure out what's being talked about inside the secret room.
And listen, this is not just some academic theory. A recent study, they called it Whisper Leak, showed just how scarily effective this is. By only looking at the encrypted traffic patterns, researchers could tell what topic was being discussed with major AI models. And get this, for over half the models they tested, they hit 100% precision. That means they could spot when a user was talking about a sensitive topic, like money laundering, with almost zero false alarms. It works.
So this brings us to a much bigger and much older question. If our best technological shield, encryption, has cracks in it, then privacy is no longer just a technical problem. It becomes a political problem. And it forces all of us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What are we willing to trade away for a feeling of security?
And that question drops us right in the middle of one of the oldest debates there is in a free society, that constant battle between our individual liberty and our collective security.
You see this play out every time a government proposes a new surveillance law. On one side, you have the argument that says, look, we're not trying to do anything new, we're just updating our tools to keep up with technology. They frame it as just maintaining the status quo. But on the other side, you have critics who see a dangerous expansion of power. They argue that these same laws are a huge shift, pulling in new companies and new types of data under the government's watch.
On one side of that debate, you have this famous, very powerful stance from Benjamin Franklin. It's the absolutist argument, right? It says that any trade-off, no matter how small, is a betrayal, that liberty is just too precious to be traded for a promise of safety. But then you have the more pragmatic counter-argument. This point of view says, look around. The reality is, we make these trades all the time. We do it when we go through an airport security line, we do it when we show a passport. So for them, the key question isn't if we should trade liberty for security, but where we as a society decide to draw the line. It's not a yes or no question, it's a negotiation.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We all want the amazing benefits of rapid innovation, we demand our right to privacy, and we expect a certain level of security and control. These three forces are just in constant dynamic tension. There are no easy answers here, only a series of choices we all have to make. So as we build this new world, the only question left is, where do you draw the line?